Hello and welcome, I'm Pallavi Sharma and you're watching BIZWORLD Weekly, a show where we bring you the top stories of the week from across the world. Let's start with the market check. Indian equity indices ended lower on the 7th consecutive session. At close, Sensex was down 0.90% at 80,426.46 points and Nifty was down 0.95% at 24,654.7 points. All sectoral indices ended in red, with the bank, capital goods, consumer durables, metals, IT, telecom, pharma, PSU bank down 1 to 2%. BSE mid-cap and small-cap indices shed 2% each. IndusInd Bank, Sun Pharma, M&M, Eternal, Tata Steel were the top losers on Nifty, while the top gainers included L&T, Tata Motors, iShares Motors, Reliance Industries and ITC. Indian rupee ended marginally lower at 88.71 per dollar on 26th of September. In the latest salvo in trade policy, President Donald Trump has announced a sweeping set of tariffs aimed at protecting the US industries, ramping up rates on variety of imports. Now let's break down what these new tariffs actually mean, who is targeted, and the ripple effects across Indian economy, especially in the pharmaceutical sector. Beginning October 1st, the US will impose 100% tariff on branded and patented pharmaceutical products, 50% tariffs on kitchen cabinets and bathroom vanities, and 30% tariffs on upholstered furniture and 25% tariffs on heavy trucks. Each of these areas touches trade with major global partners, and nowhere is the impact expected to be large than on the Indian pharma. India is the world's third largest pharma producer by volume and 14th largest by value. Its pharmaceutical sector exported $30.47 billion worth of medicines in FY25, around a 9.4% year-on-year jump. Of this, the United States is the largest market by far. According to reports, it is 31% of India's drug exports. That's roughly $8.7 billion in 2024, projected to have climbed to $10.5 billion in 2025. In May 2025 alone, Indian pharma exports to all destinations hit $4.96 billion, up 7.4% over the previous year. Indian companies supply the US with huge share of its medicines, 40% of the US generics and over 50% of global vaccine demand originates from India. Major producers are Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy's, Cipla, Biocon, your Zydus Life Sciences that generate anywhere about 30 to 50% of their overall sales in the United States market. The 100% tariff doubles the price of branded drugs and patented medicines imported into the US unless the company is actively building a manufacturing plant on the US soil. Generic drugs are spared for now, but any extension of tariffs could hit these as well. Most of India's pharmaceutical exports to the US were generic medicines, those not under patent, which are currently not targeted by this tariff. Still, the announcement sent shockwaves through the industry as many Indian pharmaceutical companies are moving into patented and complex drugs, making the sector more cautious. The other tariffs, 50% on kitchen cabinets and vanities and 30% on upholstered furniture and 25% on truck, also will impact other Indian export sectors, including furniture makers and heavy equipment companies. The market wasted no time reacting. Within hours, Indian pharmaceutical shares dropped about 2.6% on Friday, wiping out billions in market capitalization. Big companies saw volatility and investor anxiety, fearing loss of market share and lower margins as the cost of entering the US soars for major branded products. These jitters reflect broader worries about profit that could fall, and Indian pharma moving towards complex, innovative drugs may now be hampered by shrinking access to its largest export market. India's government has implemented incentives to keep the pharmaceutical sector globally competitive, including a 15,000 crore rupees production-linked initiative or PLI scheme and targeted support to smaller drug manufacturers too. Now, these efforts helped spur the investments into these high-value medicines like treatment for cancer and diabetes in India, but the new tariffs may force a reset in the market strategies. If generics are hit next, both Indian exporters and US patients could see higher prices. The UNGA meet was a bad day for Trump. As soon as he entered, the escalator stopped. Then the teleprompter did not work, and then he even claimed that there were audio issues during his speech. He says that this was done deliberately to mock him or undermine him. While the UN has played the Uno reverse card on US. It says that the escalator stopped because of a US reporter walking backwards on it, triggering safety mechanism to stop the escalator. And the teleprompter issue was because of the laptop that the US officials bought in, is what the UN has said. But Trump does not want to let it go. What did he do next? Here's a report.
During his visit to the United Nations General Assembly on September 23, 2025, President Donald Trump experienced a series of surprising technical mishaps that quickly sparked controversy. The incidents began as Trump and First Lady Melania Trump boarded an escalator inside the UN headquarters, which suddenly came to an abrupt halt. Trump later described the situation as absolutely sabotage, highlighting how both he and the First Lady narrowly avoided injury by holding on to the handrails.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood.
He referenced a report from the Sunday Times claiming some UN staff had joked about turning off escalators to embarrass him. This escalator stoppage triggered widespread attention and online speculation. The challenges continued at the podium, where Trump's teleprompter reportedly malfunctioned for the first 15 minutes of his speech, forcing him to ad-lib parts of his address.
And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart.
Following his speech, Trump also claimed the audio system in the General Assembly hall was off, with many delegates unable to hear him unless they used interpreter headsets. He cited his wife Melania as confirming the audio problems, saying she couldn't hear a word he said. In response to these events, the United Nations issued a detailed explanation. A spokesperson for the Secretary General said that the escalator's sudden stop was likely caused by a built-in safety mechanism triggered inadvertently by a videographer from the U.S. delegation. The videographer was filming while walking backward on the escalator, potentially activating the safety stop to prevent injury or mechanical damage. The escalator was reset quickly by a nearby technician, and diagnostic checks confirmed the safety feature was the cause, not sabotage. Regarding the teleprompter, the UN clarified that the equipment was operated by the White House staff, not UN personnel. As for the audio, official explanations stated that delegates usually hear speeches through individual headsets with simultaneous translations, making it unlikely that the sound was entirely off. Videos showed delegates reacting to Trump's speech, and some even laughed at his jokes relating to these technical glitches. Despite these clarifications, the White House and President Trump remained skeptical. Trump called the incidents a real disgrace and demanded an immediate investigation, urging that all security tapes, especially those related to the escalator, be preserved. He stated that the people responsible for the escalator stoppage should be arrested, and confirmed that the U.S. Secret Service had launched an inquiry into the matter. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt echoed these concerns, warning that if any UN staff intentionally cause these disruptions, they must be fired and investigated immediately. She cited the same London Times report as evidence suggesting the escalator stoppage was deliberate.
For decades, the US had an upper hand. They held the top talent of the world. But not anymore. Last weekend came as a blow for those who saw the American dream. Trump's new policy imposed a staggering $100,000 fee on first-time H-1B visa applicants. This fee applies only to new applicants and not to extensions or renewals, and it is not an annual fee. Historically, the H-1B program had an annual cap of $85,000 with a lottery system used to select applicants due to high demand. Now, the Trump administration has also proposed replacing this lottery with a wage-based prioritization system favoring higher paid applicants and companies with greater financial resources. So how does it impact India? Indian IT companies, including giants like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, and HCL Tech, have significantly relied on H-1B visa program to deploy skilled professionals to the US. However, most firms plan to pass on 30 to 70% of the increased visa cost to their clients. Over recent years, these companies have already reduced their dependence on H-1B visas by ramping up offshore delivery centers, opening nearshore sites, and increasing local hires within the US. However, the new policy poses challenges in filling mid-level roles on site in the US, as Indian IT companies often seek H-1B visas for lower wage positions, which may lose priority under the wage-based system. This pushes Indian firms towards greater automation, outsourcing, or hiring US-based talent. For US companies, though, particularly small firms and startups, they may face difficulties accessing global talent due to the prohibitive visa costs. Larger tech giants like Google, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and OpenAI with deeper pockets might better absorb these costs and strategically increase investments in India, leveraging local talent pools. However, the overall US tech ecosystem could see constrained innovation if startups and mid-sized companies struggle to bring in specialized foreign talent. The combined effect may be a shift in talent acquisition strategies, with American firms increasingly relying on offshore delivery models and Indian IT firms focusing on remote service delivery, reducing the traditional on-site presence in the US. So now, what are the alternatives for the Indians? First, O1 visa. This visa category is for individuals with extraordinary ability in their fields. It costs roughly $12,000 and bypasses lottery caps with 93% approval rate and indefinite renewals. It is highly suitable for highly skilled or specialized individuals. Second, the L1 visa. Used for intra-company transfers, L1 visa costs around $7,000. They have no cap but require the employees to have worked at the company's overseas branch for at least 1 year in the last 3 years. Third, EB5 visa. For investors, providing a route towards permanent residency by investing substantial capital in a US business. Meanwhile, other countries jumped at the opportunity to attract talented individuals from India. Germany, the UK, and Canada are actively attracting Indian tech talent by offering predictable and welcoming immigration policies with competitive salary norms and simpler visa processes. China too has joined the race and launched the K visa, targeting STEM professionals, aimed to attract talent similarly to the US H-1B, but with less costly fee, no lottery system, and a focus on fast-track approvals based on the skills. It is more affordable, it has no restrictive quotas, the selection is skill-based, the duration is shorter but can be extended, and has less restrictive wage rules. Some experts suggest that this will move and backfire for the US, and the talent will now move to China and make China great again. While tech firms may absorb the cost, non-tech firms may rethink, and the experts say that it will bring a healthcare crisis and a talent crunch in the US. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments. Trump's speech at the UNGA went viral on social media for all the wrong reasons. It was full of false claims and praises about his own administration. At one point, he even says that the immigration policies in Europe, all their countries are going to quote-unquote hell. He also said that his administration brokered a ceasefire deal between India and Pakistan, which New Delhi has in the past several times denied, saying that there was no third-party mediation. He also called India and China the major funders of the Russia-Ukraine war. He accused New Delhi and China of buying high amounts of Russian oil, calling these purchases the engine feeding Putin's war machine in the past too. Meanwhile, his team is giving mixed reactions. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, says that there is a lot of progress in the talks between India and the US. Christopher Wright, US Secretary of Energy, says that he is a fan of India, but said that India can buy oil from any nation on earth, just not Russia. He said this, listen in.
I'm a huge fan of India. We love India. We look forward to more energy trade, more interactions back and forth with India. And then India is caught up in the middle of another issue. President Trump's greatest passion is peace in the world. He is, when I talk to him, it does not matter what the topic is, peace comes up. How can we use our tools and leverage to drive peace? And the Russian war in Ukraine, of course, is brutal. We all want to see it come to an end. But where does Russian oil today that's sanctioned go? You know, it goes to China, India, and it goes to Turkey. And so that helps Russia fund that war. And that's the friction. The friction's on that issue. We want to bring that war to the end. I believe the Indians want to bring that war to an end, and we want to expand our energy cooperation with India in natural gas, in coal, in nuclear, in clean cooking fuels, liquid petroleum gas. India's been a star in that area. So we want nothing more than more trade, energy cooperation with India.
Now let's understand the economics a little. Firstly, India buys Russian oil because it's cheaper and helps safeguarding its national security and keeps global energy prices stable. Union Minister Piyush Goyal recently in a statement has also said that India is a large importer of energy and its energy security goals will have a very high element of US involvement in years to come. Secondly, India is doing nothing illegal. It buys from Russia at the cap that G7 has imposed. Russian oil is not completely banned. Third, Russia is not the sole supplier of oil to India. The US contributed 5% to India's 2025 financial year oil imports. Fourth, India is in fact increasing purchase of crude oil from the US. India is buying a lot of crude oil from the United States in 2025. Between January to June, imports rose by 51%, going up from 0.18 million barrels per day to 0.271 million barrels per day. The increase was even sharper in the April to June quarter, when the imports were 114% higher than the same period last year. In terms of value, India spent $3.7 billion on US crude in the first quarter of FY26, almost the double of $1.73 billion that it spent in the same quarter last year. By July 2025, US made up to 8% of India's total oil imports compared to just 3% earlier. Between June and July, imports from the US grew by 23%. So now why is India not wanting to buy a lot of US oil and stop Russian oil purchase? Well, oil plays an important role in keeping the inflation in check. During global instability, high inflation is the last thing a country wants. India has told US that significant reduction in Russian oil imports by Indian refiners hinges on Washington's willingness to allow crude purchases from sanctioned suppliers like Iran and Venezuela. Because US oil is much more expensive than the Russian oil, it is not buying more US oil. As of 2025, Russian Ural crude was offered to India at discount around $3 to $4 per barrel below Brent crude prices, whereas US crude was bought by Indian refiners trading at $3 premium to Brent. And it's clear why US wants India to stop buying Russian oil, or even EU to stop buying Russian oil or gas for that matter. It wants them to buy it from the US. The United States is the world's largest producer of crude oil. In August 2024, it hit a record output of 13.4 million barrels per day, with the yearly average for 2024 expected to be about 13.2 million barrels per day. If we include the crude oil, natural gas liquids and biofuels, total US petroleum production in 2023 was around 21.7 million barrels per day. Trump has imposed a 25% penalty on India for buying Russian oil, which India says is unjustified, and Russia too says that US is doing all of this to pressure other countries to buy oil from them only. Meanwhile, there is oil shortage in Russia too. The country has banned export of fuel and natural gas, which will impact Europe heavily. Russia is also the world's largest diesel producer, making the situation even worse for many countries. While this does not directly impact India, some experts say that crude prices may surge due to this, meaning lower discounts for India. India is closely watching the situation, and as said earlier, any decision to reduce imports from Russia will be taken in consideration with India's national interest. Trump is frustrated with Putin on the war with Ukraine, but Putin's one offer has impressed him. The Russian president has suggested to extend the New START treaty. He said that it does not really cost anything for Russia to extend it. The New START treaty was signed by then President Barack Obama and Dmitry Medvedev. It limits each country to not more than 1,550 deployed nuclear warheads and 700 deployed missiles and bombers. Now, Russia wants to extend it by one more year. So what is Trump's view on that? Our next report tells you.
As 2025 advances, the global spotlight turns to a high-stakes diplomatic drama between two of the world's most powerful leaders, Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump. The issue at hand, the fate of the New START treaty, a crucial pact that has for over 15 years restrained the world's largest nuclear arsenals. First signed on April 8, 2010, New START is set to expire on February 5, 2026. It places strict caps on both sides: 1,550 deployed strategic nuclear warheads and 700 deployed intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched missiles, and heavy bombers for each country. Without action, these limits and the mutually agreed verification measures will vanish, raising fears of a new era of unchecked nuclear competition. Between the two nations, Russia currently holds the larger nuclear arsenal with an estimated 6,375 total nuclear warheads, while the United States has about 5,428 warheads. However, New START limits apply specifically to deployed strategic warheads, not total stockpiles. In recent weeks, Putin has moved to break this impasse with a direct proposal to Trump: extend New START by up to 5 years, or negotiate a stronger follow-up agreement, possibly with enhanced verification and updated terms reflecting today's security environment. This proposal signals Moscow's interest in continued arms control, despite ongoing tensions. President Trump has publicly welcomed Putin's outreach. At a White House press briefing earlier this month, Trump stated, "We want peace, not a new arms race. Arms control is something we can and should work on with Russia, for the good of both our peoples and the world." He has directed U.S. negotiators to engage with their Russian counterparts, while emphasizing that any new deal must be comprehensive with strong verification safeguards to protect American interests. Both leaders face challenges. Putin seeks assurances that U.S. missile defenses and conventional forces do not threaten Russian security, while the U.S. demands strict compliance and accountability measures. These differences complicate talks, but the dialogue itself is a hopeful sign.
If you have been hearing talks of possible US government shutdown, you're not alone. But what does it exactly mean? Why is it happening now? And what is the White House planning to do about it? Well, here's a full explanation. A government shutdown happens when Congress can't agree on a federal budget or a temporary funding measure before the new fiscal year begins, which is on October 1st. Federal agencies rely on Congress to pass spending bills that fund everything from your national parks to the military. If lawmakers hit a stalemate, often over hot button issues like healthcare, taxes, and federal programs, the money runs out and the government partially shuts down. This year, it's the same story, but the details are very different. House Republicans passed a short-term funding bill, but the Senate Democrats blocked it, demanding reversals of the President Donald Trump's recent healthcare funding cuts via the One Big Beautiful Bill. Meanwhile, the president has refused to meet with the Democratic leaders, calling their budget request unserious and ridiculous. Without a deal, the government stops funding non-essential activities. Think your passport processing, your national park operations, and much of the scientific research. Essential functions, though, like the air traffic control and social security payments, keep operating. But many federal employees are furloughed or asked to work without pay. It's not new. Government shutdowns, while disruptive, are completely not a new concept. They have been there for a long time, 21 shutdowns since the late 1970s. The longest shutdown in US history ran 35 days from December 2018 to January 2019 under President Donald Trump himself, disrupting airport security, IRS refunds, and food assistance for millions of Americans. Most shutdowns end with Congress and the president finally striking a deal. But every time, federal workers and public shoulder the burden, from missed paychecks to stalled government services. So what's the plan now? Well, here's where the things get more interesting and very different. Historically, federal workers are furloughed during a shutdown and are called back once the funding is restored. But this time, the Trump White House has told agencies to prepare for mass permanent layoffs, so-called the reduction in force plans. According to a memo from the Office of Management and Budget, agencies must identify programs and jobs that could be cut altogether if no funding comes through, especially those that don't fit the president's policy priorities. Now, this is a sharp break from the past, signaling that the White House might use the shutdown to permanently shrink the federal government workforce, not just wait out for a political showdown. The administration says that the blame lies with the Democrats for blocking funding, while the Democrats say that the president's cuts to the healthcare are the real stumbling block. Congress has until midnight September 30 to reach a deal. If not, the US could see service interruptions and this time perhaps permanent job losses in the government. The stakes are very high, and as always, everyday Americans will be the first to feel the pinch. Trump had imposed massive tariffs on China to hurt its exports, but sadly for Trump, China looks unaffected. Its exports are high, trade surplus is about to reach $1.2 trillion, all because it has found new buyers. It is now trading with BRICS like never before. But what's the reality behind these numbers? Our next report tells you more.
China's global trade powerhouse is surprising the world, thanks in part to President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. While these U.S. tariffs were meant to curb Beijing's dominance, they've helped spark a record surge in Chinese exports. Blocked from direct U.S. access, Chinese manufacturers quickly pivoted, flooding global markets with ultra-cheap goods. The results are staggering. China is poised for a record $1.2 trillion trade surplus this year, reaching new buyers in India, Africa, and Southeast Asia. In August alone, exports to India hit their highest ever. Sales to Africa and Southeast Asia are breaking records, as Chinese firms adapt and reroute shipments that once went to the United States. But this export boom comes with growing alarm. Countries around the world, from Mexico to Indonesia, worry their domestic markets can't compete with the tidal wave of low-cost Chinese goods. Mexico, frustrated by what it sees as unfair competition, slapped up to 50% tariffs on imports like cars and steel. India, for its part, is investigating dumping complaints related to Chinese and Vietnamese products. Even Indonesia has tightened scrutiny of Chinese goods after public backlash. Amid these tensions, China isn't just exporting goods, it's exporting strategy. It's rallied its BRICS partners, pushed diplomatic pressure against global protectionism, and warned nations like Mexico against harsh reprisals. Despite this global success, China faces deep problems at home. China's booming exports aren't fattening its bottom line. In fact, industrial profits have dropped nearly 2% this year, as manufacturers slash prices to move excess supply. This price-driven export surge is fueling deflation, the country's longest stretch since the 1970s, and delaying ambitions to shift the economy towards stronger domestic consumption. Currency dynamics also give China an edge. The weakened yuan has made its goods even cheaper worldwide. With electric vehicle shipments alone topping $19 billion, China stays competitive. Yet stopping the influx of Chinese products is tough. Barriers from Brazil to Vietnam haven't stemmed the flow, as Chinese firms reroute products through third countries or shift final production to dodge tariffs. Nearly half the goods once sold to the US now find new homes in BRICS markets, keeping China's export engine running.
In a historic development, over 150 countries worldwide have formally recognized the state of Palestine as a sovereign nation, a move with profound implications for Gaza and the broader Israel-Palestine conflict. But what does it actually mean? Recognition of Palestine refers to the formal acknowledgement by the countries or international bodies of the Palestine territories, the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and the East Jerusalem as a sovereign independent state. Now, this recognition means that under the international law, Palestine is treated as a state with the rights and duties that come with sovereignty, including the ability to enter treaties, participate in international organizations, and seek legal protection of its territory and people. According to the 1933 Montevideo Convention, a state must meet 4 criteria to qualify: a permanent population, defined territory, a government, and a capacity to enter into relations with other states. Palestine meets those criteria despite the ongoing Israeli occupation challenges. What does it mean for Gaza now? Recognition of Palestine signifies international acknowledgement of Palestinian sovereignty over the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, the territories that Israel captured during the 1967 Six-Day War. For Gaza's 2 million residents, its recognition is both symbolic and practical. It reinforces their claim for self-determination and strengthens call for an end to the Israeli blockade and ongoing military assault, which have caused massive humanitarian crisis in the Strip. However, recognition alone does not immediately alter conditions on the ground. Gaza remains under heavy Israeli control with restrictions on movement, supplies, and governance. The recognition supports diplomatic efforts towards a two-state resolution, envisioning peaceful coexistence between an independent Palestine and Israel, but achieving this remains elusive amid ongoing violence. 157 of the 193 United Nations member states, about 81%, recognize Palestine as state. This includes most countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and many European nations too, like France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and Portugal. On the other hand, Israel and its closest ally, the United States, have not recognized Palestine's statehood. The US remains the only permanent member of the UN Security Council to not recognize Palestine. The US government continues to uphold Israel's position, frequently vetoing the UN resolutions in support of Palestinian statehood and opposing unilateral moves without negotiated peace. Israeli leaders, especially those aligned with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's conservative government, has opposed the recognition, citing security concerns and the need for direct negotiations instead. In parallel with these diplomatic moves, US President Donald Trump has proposed a controversial 21-point peace plan aimed at ending the Gaza war and addressing the long-standing territorial disputes in the West Bank. The plan includes guarantees for ceasefire, humanitarian access, and measures to counter Hamas. However, the core controversial element is its ambiguous stance on Netanyahu's plans to annex parts of the West Bank, also referred as Judea and Samaria in Israeli political discourse. Arab leaders and Palestinian officials have expressed skepticism about Trump's plan, questioning whether it can prevent an annexation or ensure genuine Palestinian sovereignty. UN is witnessing a fund shortage that could leave the world's poorest countries suffering. While Trump said that US is going to fully support the UN, it is the Trump administration who cut the funding for world organizations that led to this shortage. Trump also slammed the UN for not doing its job in his speech at UNGA this week. What will be the impact of the fund shortage on the countries? Our next report tells you.
The United Nations is confronting an urgent financial crisis. In 2026, the global body is being forced to cut more than 15% from its regular budget and to eliminate nearly 19% of staff posts, meaning that 1 in every 5 UN jobs is on the line. This deep shortfall in funding is being driven primarily by the suspension of US payments, leaving the UN with a deficit of at least $500 million and substantial arrears. Who is responsible for this situation? According to reports, the US, traditionally the largest funder of the UN, has ceased contributions, sending financial shockwaves across the UN system. Since Trump returned to office, the US has historically covered about 22% of the UN's budget. The resulting budget crunch has forced the organization into difficult trade-offs, affecting peacekeeping, humanitarian, and development work, as well as the daily lives and job security of thousands of UN staff. Who will be affected? Secretary General Antonio Guterres has stated that the reductions have been carefully planned to shield the most vulnerable, least developed countries, landlocked states, and small island nations, particularly those already suffering from climate change. Key funds like the Peacebuilding Fund and technical capacity building for the poorest will face little or no reduction. Much of Africa, for example, is set to be protected from the worst cuts. However, for many other vital programs, especially in peacekeeping, humanitarian relief, and human rights, the cuts threaten to slow down or reduce operations. Plans include relying more on virtual tools and automation, increasing workloads, pooling expertise, and moving jobs out of high-cost duty stations to cities with lower expenses. For the UN workforce, this translates into fewer positions, possible relocations, and career uncertainty. As the Secretary General notes, this unprecedented retrenchment touches on the daily work and professional lives of staff, but aims to maintain geographic and gender diversity and uphold the UN's core mandates and service quality. The effects will be felt globally, but the hope remains that the most vulnerable will not bear the brunt.
That's all for this week. I will see you in the next. Keep watching ET Now for more such news and views.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.